Okay guys, I'm standing here between our two CNC machines. Now my assumption is that you're a beginner and that you've never worked with a CNC machine before, or potentially that you've never actually even seen a CNC machine before other than maybe something on YouTube or whatever the case may be. So please excuse me if you know the basics of this, but this is for beginners, and that's what this whole lesson is about. So the first thing that you'll notice between these two machines is this is a single head machine and this is a three head machine or triple head. The only difference between the two is that obviously this has got smaller spindles, but because we've got three spindles, we can select different tool sizes, and the machine itself will select, in the G-code, will select the tool size required for the job and then cut accordingly. So for argument's sake, if I want to cut a thin 3mm slot, it'll select tool number 3, switch it down, and then cut that slot, and then use the 10mm or whatever I set it up to be to do the more robust, more industrial sort of area clearing work and that type of thing. So this machine switches between router bits. The single head machine, which is more in line with the hobbyist type of, let's say smaller scale domestic machines, if you want to call that, is a single head machine that you have to do your tool change manually yourself. So what will happen is you'll have a 6mm bit, you'll run your 6mm file, and then once that's completed, you will have to then swap it out with a 3mm file, and then you can cut the thin slots. So it's just a manual change. That's the only difference between these two specific machines. Then you get more advanced machines that basically has a single spindle, but can select multiple tools. So the machine moves its way back, it'll select the tool that it needs that's in a sort of a holster, if you want to call it that, and put that bit in place, and then do whatever needs to be done. Those are on the higher end machines. But I think working on a single spindle, single head type of machine is the best way forward for most of the people out there. Not everyone can afford multiple tool changing, whatever machines. So we'll just stick to the single head. Now, to give you an idea, the domestic or let's say hobbyist style machines don't necessarily have a vacuum bed. This machine has got a 2x3 meter vacuum bed, which means that I switch on the vacuum pump and it sucks the material down so that nothing moves. The hobbyist machines sometimes require clamping or some nails. You can use composite nails or steel nails. Just make sure that your router bit does not hit the steel nails. That tends to cause a bit of damage on the bit itself. But that's the main difference between size and the vacuum bed. That's basically the only difference between this machine and the hobbyist machine. Obviously the horsepower on the different spindles. Now, the bigger the spindle, the stronger the spindle, the easier it cuts through whatever materials we've got. So this machine, as I mentioned before, is a 2x3 meter bed size, which means that it can accommodate a full sheet that we have in South Africa, which is a 1.8 meter by 2.7 meter board. It's our standard stock sheets that we usually use. There are sheets that are a little bit longer, but I think in the US they call this a 6x9. And then the 5x8 is the 1.2 by 2.4 meter sheet. Now you'll notice on StockFit, there are some files on the smaller items that require you to do a smaller item, a smaller sheet on those items. The bigger items obviously require bigger sheets depending on the joinery. And so be sure to check the sheet sizes and your capacity or capability of your CNC machine accordingly. Don't download a file for a large bed like this when you've only got access to a smaller bed. But that will be covered in a later lesson. You'll notice that we've got a 16mm board. That's the stock standard that we usually use. You can go quite a wide range of thicknesses on this machine. Obviously, you don't want it to reach the gantry point here or the router bit. So you want to set your 0 point to maybe 150 or so at the most. But we use 16mm boards on StockFit of this MDF usually. It works well, and that's what StockFit is all about. So the rest of the lessons we'll just cover 16mm boards. Now, on the CNC machine, left to right is your x-axis, front to back is your y-axis, up and down is your z-axis. So in this specific machine, we'll have to select our tool, which is sorry, I just want to... Okay. So we selected the second spindle, tool number 2 in this case. So what will happen now is if we increase the x-axis, the spindle itself will move left to right. Just an example of how that moves. And then back again. If we increase and decrease the y-axis, then we'll get the same effect, but forward and back, obviously. So, and then the last thing is obviously the z-axis, which is the up and the down. Sorry about that. So we've got up and down, which then gives the machine its allocated depth at which it needs to cut. So basically, the way that it works is you will download G-code files from StockFit, or you'll create your own G-code files. You'll plug it into the computer box on this machine, copy the G-code over to the machine itself, and then simply press play. This machine will then select the tool that you've allocated, which in most cases will be tool number 1, assuming that we've got a single spindle machine, and it'll cut out the panels according to the coordinates of the G-code. So the G-code would say X0 to X300 mil, or whatever the case is. It'll start here, it'll move 300 mil across that way. The Z-axis will then be the depth. So if you want to cut right through the material, the Z will say minus 16. It will go through the material and then move according to those coordinates. So the G-code basically gives these spindles the coordinates of where to move in order to cut out the certain panels and the slots and the holes and all the things that you need. Once that's done, basically you can just lift up those panels and then assemble them as you would on the rest of the StockFit system. So that is the basic overview on CNC machines.